Alexander Hamilton was one of America's first founding fathers, and he led a pretty amazing life. He started out as an orphan, and eventually he fought in the Revolutionary War. And later on, at the peak of his political career, eventually worked his way to the top of the executive branch. Um, he was born on a small Caribbean island called Nevis on January 11th, 1755. And his parents weren't together. His dad left the family, and his mom died when Hamilton was 13 years old. So he was left as an orphan. And afterwards, he got a job at a shipping company as an apprentice. And there he worked around and dealt with handling a multitude of different currencies. And that's really where he got his first experience dealing in economics and in money, or the buying and selling part of economics. Um, and he eventually started attracting a lot of attention from people, and they saw that he was really intelligent, and so they wanted to see him develop that by sending him to school. So he was sent to New York, where he attended King's College, which is now Columbia University. And that's when he was 18. And around the same time, um, there was the Boston Tea Party, which happened December 16, 1773, where frustrated colonists basically threw a bunch of tea overboard ships because they were tired of the high taxes that the British were placing on tea and also other goods that they couldn't really afford. So they were protesting against that. And Alexander Hamilton, he he heard about this, and he started publishing pamphlets in support of um, in support of the colonists, and expressing his own views about independence. And yeah, that's where he started developing and expressing his the start of his political views, writing those pamphlets about the Boston Tea Party. And afterwards, in 1776, he joins um, the Continental Army to fight in the Revolutionary War. And um, he's promoted to captain, and eventually he meets General George Washington, and George Washington takes him under his wing and makes him his chief aide. And so, for the next several years that the war was in effect, they fought alongside each other, they depended on each other, and Washington mostly depended on the skills that Hamilton possessed, especially in his writing. And in 1778, the soldiers were running really low on supplies, and they had to retreat to Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. And Washington, he told Hamilton to write letters to Congress, basically pleading for their help to bring them um, more supplies for the soldiers who were struggling. And at that time, it was really hard getting Congress to do that. And Hamilton started to realize that there were a lot of problems in the government, and he sought to find out how to fix those problems early on. So in 1781, America eventually won independence from British rule in that final battle of Yorktown. And after that, Alexander Hamilton, he marries a woman named Elizabeth or Eliza Schuyler, and she is a socialite. So now he has upped his social and economic status as an elite. And they have their first son, Philip. And at this time, Hamilton picks up law. He starts studying it, passes the bar exam, and he starts practicing. And this is where he meets Aaron Burr. And Aaron Burr, he's very important. So remember this name because he's going to be brought up quite a lot during Hamilton's story. And they develop a feud between each other because of their different views about the government. And during this time, there's also a debate between state and federal power and whether the state has too much power and things of that nature. And so Hamilton, he gets this idea that he wants to start reforming the government because there's a lot of problems with it, and he wants to fix it. And so he goes to the Virginia politician James Madison, and they start to talk about different ideas about creating a central government, essentially. And together with John Jay also, they all published the Federalist Papers as a way of convincing the American people and also Congress that there should be a national government. And the whole essays contained 85 pages, 51 of which Hamilton himself wrote. And the Federalist Papers, they were very influential in getting our Constitution eventually ratified by Congress, which happened in 1788 after the Constitutional Convention 1787 in Philadelphia. And of course, George Washington, he doesn't miss the opportunity to act as Hamilton's sponsor, advocating for his ideas as well. So he was a big influence and part in getting this pushed through Congress as well. So that was one of Hamilton's first major accomplishments, very significant accomplishment. There were a lot of opposers to an idea of a central government because people were basically arguing we just came from under a monarchy, and that a lot of those principles that Hamilton was talking about kind of mirrored the the um, the British rule that we just fought to win our independence from. So a lot of people were reluctant about joining Hamilton in implementing those ideas. In 1789, George Washington was elected as our first president of the United States. And at 34 years old, Hamilton was chosen by Washington to be our nation's first Secretary of the Treasury because Washington saw that Hamilton was somewhat experienced or very experienced in currency and in the economy and just dealing uh, with uh, with money overall. Um, so by now, almost a decade has passed since America won our independence. So we're making progress, great progress, and we have our own president so far. We've passed our own constitution, and now we have our first Secretary of the Treasury. And now, at this time, um, our cabinet is being formed. Um, the first, one of the many first challenges that Hamilton faced as Secretary of the Treasury is managing our national debt. We spent trillions of dollars in the Revolutionary War, and now there was this question of how we were going to re pay off that debt. And Hamilton, he was proposing some solutions that people didn't agree with. So, for example, he was suggesting that the repayment of the debt be put on the federal government, or no, actually, he basically wanted everybody, the states, to chip in repaying the debt. And some of the states, such as Virginia, that already paid off their debt, didn't want to pay off other states' debt, so they didn't really want a part of that. And really, from the beginning, we can say that the states really didn't want to take on any or a lot of financial responsibility, whether it be paying taxes or paying off the national debt. They were kind of just interested in their own selfish financial gain, I guess you could say. Um, and also during this time, James Madison, who once helped Hamilton in writing the Federalist Papers to get the Constitution ratified, he was now kind of turning against him because he didn't agree that his state, Virginia, should be hold any responsibility in paying off the national debt. So he kind of disagreed on that, and then James Madison and Alexander Hamilton kind of drifted apart because of that. And Hamilton's opposition was also joined by Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, and also, again, Aaron Burr, who was also a lawyer. He was now elected into the Senate, so he has a lot more influence in politics, just as Hamilton. So now all three, Aaron Burr, James Madison, and Thomas Jefferson, are the leading figures, political figures who are opposing um, Alexander Hamilton's ideas about our financial debt. Also, at this time, the capital of the United States is moved to Washington, D.C. So there were some people who wanted moved to their states, but eventually was moved to Washington, D.C. Um, Another accomplishment of Hamilton's was he got his debt plan approved by Congress in 1790. And he also, and this is a big accomplishment, he started to build the foundations of Wall Street that we see today. So, for example, he started um, creating the first bond market, and he created the first federal bank, and he created a national currency because before the 13 colonies, they each had their own currency, and it was just, as you can imagine, with different states having different kinds of currency is just creating a lot of problems, chaos, and confusion. So Hamilton sought to resolve that just by creating one national currency at one federal bank, which he was successful in doing. And his bank bill passes in Congress February 25th, 1791. And also, Washington approves the first bank of the United States, which is what we now refer to as the Federal Reserve. Another major accomplishment is that in April 2nd, 1792, Congress passes the Coinage Act, creating a new U.S. dollar and a mint to make it. Also, at this time, all the tensions between Hamilton and Jefferson split the country into essentially two different political parties. And one of those were called the Jeffersonians, who they believed that there should be more power for the states, and they're also known as Republicans. So those are followers of Thomas Jefferson, and the other group were referred to as the Federalists, which were supported Alexander Hamilton, and they believed that there should be a central government, of course, and a strong central government and also strong executive branch. And also, the French Revolution happened during this time, and where England was at war with France. And the United States was trying to decide what action, if at all, they should take in this, because France, during our Revolutionary War, provided us with critical aid in helping us fight against the British. So now they were under attack. And the United States was trying to decide whether we should intervene and help them. And Hamilton was against the idea because we were just coming not too long ago out of a war ourselves, and we were just still trying to get ourselves established, not only in our government, but we also really didn't have a military. So that would be putting ourselves in a compromising situation. And Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, he wanted to intervene and on our allies' behalf, which was France. So he wanted to take action, but ultimately George Washington